what moment do you realize the game is weird? At what moment do you look at what you're playing and think how crazy this game is? What creates this weird game? And these are just some of the questions that pop into my head as I wander up a snot mountain as a potted plant. Risk of Rain 2 is a weird game. It's a game that has so many strange items, locales, and interactions that you find something even stranger the next time you play or read a logbook. And today, I want to highlight some of the strange or silly things that can happen in the Risk of Rain 2 world. My name is Sir Lord, and this is the strange game of Risk of Rain 2. To start off with, let's look at some of the logbook entries to start simple, and we'll work our way up from there. We'll begin with the entry of the abandoned aqueduct, in which we find another survivor wandering the desert and finding themselves in a place with a strange black-brown liquid. And unfortunately for the survivor, they managed to fall into one of the waterfalls while battling with some beetles. They survived the encounter, and as luck would have it, they had a healing drone to help cure their broken leg. But there's something strange occurring. Their speech pattern becomes irregular. They're slowly adding chit to every other word. Nothing too big. It's just a weird way for it to interact with the healing drone, possibly. Like a voice command. But as the days go by, the chit becomes more and more prevalent, replacing more and more words, and the healing drone begins to drift farther and farther away until it leaves the survivor. And at that point, the survivor knows something is wrong. They begin to vomit out the black liquid, not too dissimilar to the one that they found at the waterfall. And the last thing that we get from the log is a half of a need in a sea of chit. The transformation is complete, and the survivor has become a beetle, and now probably wanders the desert, trying to push others into the same trap that they fell into. That is such a sad tale. The slow burn of watching someone barely survive and slowly turn into a monster over the course of a few days is honestly quite depressing. Just one mistake on this planet, and you could turn into a beetle wandering the desert for the rest of your life. But that's not the only sad tale Risk of Rain likes to tell, nor is the prevalence of sad tales what makes this game so weird. It's not a depressing game. It is juxtaposing sad with silly that creates this strange, weird atmosphere. Our next log comes from Tougher Times, the teddy bear, which follows a soldier coming to the planet to recover his lost friend that was lost in transit and crashed somewhere on this planet. While his cohort may be skeptical that he'll ever find his treasured prize, he is confident that as soon as he arrives on the planet, he will be reunited with his beloved teddy bear. Like, do you see what I mean? We have a depressing tale right next to reuniting with a teddy bear. It's weird and silly in all the best ways, making some truly unique storytelling. But lore isn't the only thing that is weird in this game. There are gameplay elements that are also extremely strange, and some interactions can create weird scenarios. For instance, there's an active item known as the Executive's Card, which doesn't do anything when you activate it, but when you use it to buy a chest, you get an activation trigger, meaning it's an active that is a passive. But what pushes this item to even weirder and stranger interactions is when you combine it with Bottled Chaos. Bottled Chaos activates a random equipment effect when you use your equipment. But you can't activate the Executive Card through traditional means. You have to buy an item or a chest or shop. So you can turn any of those items into equipment in a weird roundabout logic sense. But it's such a weird item and combination that you can't help but be like, that's totally strange and very backwards from how the game usually works out. But I saved the best two for last. Unfortunately, one of these interactions were patched out due to community feedback, which is really unfortunate. But both of which involve the artifact of evolution. And for those who do not know, this gives enemies items in between stages. And before the most recent update during the recording of this video, if enemies got the item shipping request, some form of shenaniganry could happen. So shipping request is an item that would spawn a crash ship at the beginning of each stage for each survivor with the item. The ship would have 2 items that the player could pick up, and if they had the executive card, they could even get both items. But the strange interaction was when the enemies would get said item. So if an enemy would get a shipping request, a ship would spawn for each enemy that was initially spawned into the map. Meaning, if you spawned into a stage and there were 5 enemies on the map, and you only had 1 player with the item, you would see 6 crash ships that the players could interact with and obtain free items. It was hilarious. And unfortunately, the shipping request form was blacklisted from the Artifact of Evolution so that enemies could no longer obtain it. I do not know why it was removed. It was a community suggestion, but in this case, I believe it removed something cool and strange from the game. Yes, it kind of made your run absurdly busted if you did get it, but if you had to get lucky to obtain it, and with the Artifact of Evolutions, your runs are just as likely to go horribly wrong as they are to go just as well. Speaking of which, our last interaction is one of the most weird and hilarious of the bunch. I don't know if anyone else has found this yet. I haven't seen anything on the wiki or any post when I was making the script, so I believe me and my friends might be the only ones to know what happens besides probably Hoppo themselves. And that is Eulogy 0 and its nightmare of effects on evolution, and honestly just how it affects the game in general. So let's break it down slowly. Eulogy 0 makes it so normal items can spawn as lunar items, which at first you're like, okay, cool, so it's an easy way to get lunars into the normal item rotation. But what's bizarre is what happens with evolution on. So evolution is affected by your Eulogy 0s, meaning that enemies can get lunar items, which is not supposed to happen by default evolution. So you could get things like enemies with Shape Glass and Transcendence. But that's only like the tip of the iceberg. I guess we're like on layer 2 right now. We can go so much deeper. So a set of items that you can obtain are the heresy items, which for those of you who do not know, when you obtain all the heresy items, you turn into a survivor that is not selectable by default, the heretic. Each of these heresy items are related to one of your abilities. You have your primary, your secondary, your utility, and your ultimate, or your super, or whatever you want to call it. And when you get all 4, you turn into the heretic, which is all those 4 abilities on one item. Now, what happens when the enemies get all 4 heresy items? The answer is every single one of them turns into the heretic survivor. And I quite literally mean all of them. At least all the ones that actually get the items. Void enemies are actually excluded from evolution since they have void items, I guess. That's my assumed reason. Alright. So, we've turned all the enemies into the heretic. What does this mean? and what can we do with it? Well, one hilarious interaction is actually the void enemies themselves that we were just talking about. Because if a heretic enemy gets infected with the void, they lose all items from the artifact of evolution, which is hilarious. But weirdly enough, the items are what's giving them the abilities in the first place. Meaning, they can't attack. Like, at all. It's hilarious. I'm actually pretty sure this is how this works. I haven't got like 100% confirmation because we'll get into this later. It's really hard to tell once you've gotten to this point in the game. And we'll go way more into that a bit later on. But your proc chains are most likely going to one-shot everything and get rid of the void fields as soon as possible. And if you're not one-shotting everything, we'll get into why you're probably not gonna get to this point. But you guys can try and do the science on whether or not they can attack. It'd probably be easier to use like God mode or something, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to see if this is actually how it worked, so I just went with vanilla Risk of Rain, no modifications, no RNG manipulation, no console, no nothing. Regardless, even if they can't or cannot attack, it's still hilarious watching all the heretics running around the map going in and out of strides of heresy. Warhammer 40k fans, you can have as much fun destroying all essence of heresy that you see. It's just a silly little thing you can do. But we do have one more enemy that is of note that is affected by this combination. And that is the big man on the moon himself, Mithrix. And Heretics Mithrix is probably the single hardest enemy in the game. I do not know exactly how the Heretics scales when it is turned, or when the enemies turn into it. I believe they get modifiers based on what the enemy was before transforming, as well as survivor scaling stats combined with the level of the monsters. Which means that Heretics Mithrix is buff and a gigantic mass of stats is not the only thing you're going to have to worry about when fighting Mithrix. You also have to worry about how fast you can actually burst him, because if you cannot kill Heretic Mithrix fast enough, it will heal and be untargetable from Strides of Heresies. We'll get into Strides in full detail in a minute. But you will also probably get two-shot if you get hit by literally any of his attacks. And you might be like, oh, one-shot protection will save me. And that's not true. I said two-shot. So, Heresy Mithrix will have Essence of Heresy as well, which gives him Ruin. And for the uninitiated, I guess it's a herb, because heresy, but whatever. For the uninitiated, Ruin is an ability that can only do something if your enemy has a stack of Ruin. So, what it does to the target is the target takes damage, you apply a stack of Ruin, and then you can use Ruin to detonate the stacks, dealing damage to the enemy. That means you're not protected with one-shot protection, because they will hit you with the ability, and then they'll activate Ruin. And yes, Heretic Mithrix will use all of the abilities in place of the standard Mithrix moveset. In addition to that, I believe the AI tries to use the ability as soon as possible, meaning it will always activate Ruin given the chance. And to be honest, guys, I just wanted to make this video about Heretic Mithrix. As I said, I have not seen anyone else talk about this anywhere. So I just wanted to see if you guys wanted to try it out, or if you wanted to test RNGesus to bestow upon you this kind of run, because I don't think very many people play with Evolution often, which is fair, but there's some crazy scenarios. And then I was trying to grind to get some good footage for this video, and I realized just how difficult this run actually is. Alright, so for this part of the video, I'm actually going to go into rant mode because this run is frustrating. So if you want, you can skip ahead to the outro, but this is me going into detail about just how difficult this run is. So first off, like I was saying earlier, I don't think that the heretic, when summoned in this method, is calculated the same as it would be for Artifact of Vengeance. I believe when it's Artifact of Vengeance, it's pretty much carbon copies of you, including your level. But when you have it for Evolution, it is going to be based on the levels of the enemies, which far outstrips how far you can get as a survivor. So they are going to be insanely tanky. In addition to that, you also have to worry about the items that the enemies can get. I get that makes sense because like they could get insane items, but there are certain items that the enemies can get that make the run just not worth it. Like you have to play absurdly careful, and as you know, in Risk of Rain, you can't really like afford to just like have all your time go away. You have to play smart if you're gonna go for a deep run like this. So things like Tesla coil, and yes, I'm bringing up reds because in stage 5 you're guaranteed to get a red, so it goes white white, green green, red. So on stage 5 it's a big one to see what item the enemies get, because if they get a Tesla coil, you lose. Like you're done. You're not going to be able to beat Tesla coil. There's a lot of red ones that aren't very useful for the enemies, but Tesla coil is one of the ones that like you can't beat it. You take so much damage so quickly. Like that item is absurd when every single monster has it. Like they will begin to spawn, you won't be able to hit them, and you'll die. And that's not the only reason you can't beat Tesla coil. So I brought up Strides of Heresy a lot in this video. Strides makes this challenge infuriating because all of the little enemies, the big enemies, every single enemy will have strides. So you have to be able to one-shot them or else you will not be able to kill them, because they're also going to get things like purities, which means they're going to have their cooldowns reduced. They're also going to get the Light Flux Pauldron, which is going to reduce their cooldowns even further. You can get lucky and get all 4 items, with the last one being Heresy in the first 4 goes. But honestly, that's not realistic unless you have like the Uber God run. But if they get Heresy early and they have Tesla coil, you won't be able to affect them, and they'll still be able to electrocute, zap, murder you. In addition to that, you also have them getting things like Shape Glass, so they're going to be dealing double damage. And if they're in Heresy, you can't really touch them. It's especially bad on the overloading Magma Worm, the actual, like, the blue one, not the Elite Magma Worm, but, like, the blue worm that shoots lightning around it. I know you guys have seen it. Usually you'll find it later on in runs. That enemy is unkillable pretty much, because while it's in strides, it still gets the lightning strikes, and it just makes it like it one shots. Well, not one shots. It has to 2-shot you because of 1-shot protection, but it will 2-shot you because of ruin as well. And it's just a nightmare because that's an aura. You can't attack it while it's in strides, and strides is on like a 2-second cooldown, depending on, maybe even sooner than that, depending on how many stacks they get. In this run, I died so many times, and these aren't short runs either. You have to go deep into these runs to get this, and even then I couldn't even get actual footage of it because I only have done this like once, twice, actually twice. I've done it twice, but that was me testing to see if it was done for my own pleasure. I was a dingus and I forgot to actually record footage for it. So when I was trying to get footage for this, I kept dying and dying and dying. Thankfully, I have a screenshot, thanks to my friend for that. But we do have a screenshot giving you proof. Um, the other part of it is you just have to get lucky. Like, you can guarantee lunar items every time from the roll, but you still have to get all 4 items. And with the RNG that it takes to get there, your computer's going to be struggling at this point. Like, typically, if you're lucky, you're good. If you can get it within like the first 7, 8, you're good. But oh my gosh, when I was doing it, I just could not get the last one. It was excruciating. I think the highest one I went to was like around 60 something before I died because overloading worms or crashing the computer or any of that would occur constantly. Um, Rant over. You should try the run yourself though. It's pretty fun run, and Artifact of Evolution is silly and has a lot of crazy shenaniganry that can go on. So Risk of Rain 2, it seems to be a weird game. You got all sorts of crazy, weird shenaniganry. I kind of hope that they patch back in shipping requests being an item. But let me know in the comments below what weird, strange interactions, logbook entries, lore that you know about Risk of Rain 2. I freaking love this game. It's one of my favorite games of all time, probably. And I look forward to sharing all this info for you. Let me know if you tried the Mithrix Heretic run, and if you could get like an actual video footage, that'd be awesome. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.